What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So as we've started the year, there's been more and more talk around what's next for Nintendo with their quote-unquote Switch 2. Well, yesterday, things got really interesting when some new information around the internals of the device were posted online, and it sent expectations for this device through the roof, and we'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Spider-Man 2 and how we just all of a sudden have an idea as to when it's coming out after the voice actor just kind of posted it online. And we'll also be going over Microsoft, Sony, and that Activision Blizzard deal, as it looks like Microsoft is getting pretty serious. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're gonna start today with EA and Battlefield, as it appears that several titles in that franchise are just being delisted from digital stores. We can see this posted up over on EA's website saying, starting April 28th, 2023, Battlefield 1943, Bad Company 1 and 2 will be removed from digital storefronts, and you will no longer be able to purchase them. Now, originally when this was posted up, Mirror's Edge was in there for some reason, and they removed it after updating the page, so maybe keep that in mind for Mirror's Edge. I think it may have been in here because of leaderboards. That's honestly the only reason I can assume, whereas obviously with these Battlefield games, you have servers and people playing online against each other, and this is it's kind of a sad thing to see. Bad Company 2 was legendary when it came out. It was such a good Battlefield game. I just have a lot of fond memories for it. And here we are now with it just being delisted. If you have the game, you can still play all the single-player stuff, obviously, and I believe you can still re-download the title if you've purchased it on digital stores up until this point. So I guess if you want to at least make sure you have it in your digital library for re-download, you might want to go pick it up soon. Also, with Bayonetta Origins now out, many fans are wondering what's next for the series. Well, we can actually see this posted up by VGC. And this was in an interview through Famitsu, speaking with Kamiya and Platinum about the franchise. And we can see this from the producer of the Bayonetta series, saying, "We currently have nothing concrete to share with you about the future of the series yet, but I personally do not believe this is the end of Bayonetta." And I would be shocked if this was it for the series after Bayonetta 3. Well, it appears anyway from the outside looking in that there were some development issues, and that could have been due to the pandemic. As we know, remote work and different things really sent a lot of development cycles into flux. It certainly appeared like that took a bit longer than it should have based on the game that we ended up getting with Bayonetta 3. Not that it's not a good game or anything, but it doesn't feel like it has that scope that would have taken 5 or even 6 years to develop. But it's sold well enough for the franchise. Bayonetta is not a huge selling franchise, but it getting to 1 million sold faster than any of the other titles shows that they're at least on an upward trajectory, and I'd be shocked if they cut it off here. So not really sure if they go Bayonetta 4 or they maybe pivot a bit and come up with a new series in that franchise. But yeah, something tells me they still have quite a bit more with the Bayonetta series in the future. Oh, and we had just talked about how that new Lego racing game just kind of leaked online from 2K, and they just decided to get out, I guess, after that, even ahead of the announcement, just let us know that it is coming. We can see this posted up over on the Lego Twitter account saying we're not supposed to say anything, but tune in for March 23rd. So again, they saw a lot of it going around and said, we'll just put something up now. Just let everyone know that tomorrow, the 23rd, they will be officially unveiling the game. And we can even see 2K getting in on the action saying, we're hoping to keep this a secret. Thanks a lot, Steve. So, hey, we'll at least be able to see it tomorrow. It was pretty close before it necessarily leaked out with screenshots, just a couple of days. But when you start playtesting and having other people try it out, then you do run the risk of just them leaking it online. But I'm excited to see what they have for us with the new LEGO Racers game in 2023. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Nintendo and their next generation platform that most of us assume is going to be a play off of the current Switch, more or less the 3DS from the DS. A more powerful, more capable system, maybe with a twist thrown in there, some new concept to attach to that hybrid model. Well, as we've gone along, people have been able to dig and find all kinds of information around what NVIDIA and Nintendo are developing to go into the system, and some of this had to do with the leaks with NVIDIA, with NVN, and other aspects, and we've also, of course, heard accounts online that were more just complete rumor mill territory, but still, we see with something like 4chan, where they get all the Pokemon stuff right, and oh yeah, there's a new Switch we're developing a patch for to make the visuals better. Well, now we have one from a bit more of a reliable leaker. We can see this posted up over on Twitter from Connor. It says another NVIDIA Tegra for Nintendo Switch will manufactured from 5LPP. Keep uploading this info in Twitter as soon as I can. So from what I've been able to gather, this Twitter account, Connor, going back, mostly has ties to like mobile technology when it comes to leaking information, and specifically seems to be more tied to Samsung than any of the other companies. And it's interesting because, well, here is another Tegra for the Switch being manufactured by Samsung, as that's what the 5LPP would be coming from. That's low power plus and would be 5 nanometers from Samsung. I think it's interesting, and it caught some people off guard, is that a lot of us were assuming they would stick with TSMC for it, but who knows? Maybe Samsung, they have some chips laying around. Maybe they gave them a better deal just on manufacturing in general, and they were like, hey, we'll give you a better bulk offer than what TSMC, or maybe they just have the factory available. However, talking about the fabrication process at 5 nanometers is a bit surprising to people, because a lot of the speculation that was being drawn for the chip that could be going into the new platform, 7 to 8 nanometers. And even that was kind of like, oh, okay, Nintendo's going to push that, huh? 5 nanometers brings up a lot of question marks for this system. Specifically, what Nintendo is going to do here to push it for visuals or battery life, efficiency. There are a couple different routes they can go here, and the one variable, even though a lot of people say we have all the stuff for the chip, we know what's going into it, we don't know the clock speeds for it. And that is the part that I think can throw a wrench in a lot of people's plans, because now seeing a 5 nanometer fabrication around the chip that Samsung, Nvidia, Nintendo are all involved with, there's thoughts that this thing could be something like an Xbox Series S. I've seen people about a PS4 that would be in the palm of your hands as a handheld device. Well, to be fair, we don't necessarily see that in raw power from the Steam Deck. It's able to achieve basically those kind of visuals, because you can play Elden Ring as an example in handheld mode for like an hour and a half, but they're newer technology, obviously, from AMD versus the PS4 that released in 2013. I do believe Nintendo, Nvidia, they can reach PS4 base level in handheld mode, but not necessarily through just raw power, more or less through different tricks and technologies that Nvidia has to accompany the teraflop number. The other aspect to this is we would start finding out about the fabrication probably closer to when it's actually going into manufacturing, which one tells me probably not being manufactured yet. And this is all speculation, obviously, but if I had to take a guess, and I think, again, Nintendo may try to reenact the entire Switch launch, so first half of 2024, you figure it would go into manufacturing August, maybe September, possibly, just so that they can have everything ready to go, like 1 million plus units for launch, say in March, maybe April. Although to close out the fiscal year with a console launch would be beneficial for a company that has shareholders to appease. And when you know it, as this video is being edited and put together, Connor did put out an update around the situation, saying, sorry, Tegra for Nintendo has been dropped a few days or months ago. It was 5LPP, but unfortunately, the Nvidia changed Atlan to Thor. They seem to have canceled the Tegra for Nintendo, but the news for Nvidia Tegra will be keep updating, still keep updating the Nvidia Tegra line and news going forward. So basically went from, could this be a 7 nanometer, 8 nanometer chip for Nintendo, now to 5 nanometer, 5LPP, back to square one. I assume now people are expecting the 7 nanometer to 8 nanometer. It's been all over the place just in the last 24 hours with this situation, all coming from just a couple of tweets on Twitter. And it kind of just encapsulates just the frenzy that takes place online when any little bit of news could possibly get out there around what we could expect power-wise from the Switch successor. I guess the last thing to really say is be careful with some of those expectations, because we saw this with the regular Switch now when it was releasing back in late 2016, early 2017. There was a lot of talk around how powerful the chip inside of that system would be. And there were people who really, went X2 full on. It's going to have A73s. It's going to, be really, really powerful. And it comes out and it was more or less a cut down X1 when it came to clock speeds and certain things being disabled. So I think that was kind of a splash of cold water for people who thought that Nintendo was building this monster. So again, be careful with those expectations. But at the very least, should be more powerful than the current system, and that's kind of what people are more or less shooting for right now. Next up, let's talk about Spider-Man 2 and how we just randomly found out, I guess, when it's releasing. And it's a funny thing to see because while the games industry is very secretive, a lot of other industries, movie, any of that TV show, it really isn't. They're very open about a lot of these different things, like years in advance. So when you see Spider-Man 2's release month get dropped online from the Venom voice actor, you go, well, they don't really know necessarily how the gaming scene is with a lot of these release dates and secretiveness. We can see this posted up over on Twitter from Tony Todd. Says, looks like September. Massive publicity coming in August. Commercials start dropping in August, so I'm told. Hold on to your end breath. Gonna be necessary. This was in response to a fan, Mark, who says can't come quick enough for Spider-Man 2 after they posted some images of them doing mocap and all these different things. Later on, they posted up another tweet trying to play it off a bit. Hey, that's enough that's enough for me for now to talk about Spider-Man 2. So yeah, at this point, I had mentioned it would be very interesting to see Spider-Man 2 go up against Starfield, and it could be even in the same week or two of each other. And looking at it now in September, you figure if Starfield's in the first half of September, maybe Spider-Man 2 ends up in the second half of the month, but still, it'll be compared on different sales charts like the MPD and all these other ones. So it's going to be interesting to see that, but that means that September would turn out to be a pretty good month overall just from those two titles, Starfield and then Spider-Man 2. And it is nice also to know that we would be getting it earlier on in like the second half of the year rather than have to wait to November, because I'm just ready to get Spider-Man 2 after seeing what Insomniac was able to do with that first Spider-Man on the PS4. They did Spider-Man Miles Morales, still good, but also was still on the PS4. I'm curious what they can do when they just get the focus on the PlayStation 5, because it was already impressive enough from last generation. Let's see what they can do with a more powerful system, as well as be able to focus primarily on that SSD. Hoping they can really show us what the PS5 is capable of, because for the most part, I'm going to say I don't think we've seen it just yet. So here's hoping. Next up, let's talk about that Microsoft, Sony, Activision, Blizzard situation once again. I am hoping we're getting closer to the conclusion of this, as it seems like a lot of regulatory bodies around the world are at least honing in on a decision, I would say in the next 2 to 3 months, to line up with Microsoft's perceived June closing time. But it also seems that Microsoft is just getting a bit more serious here, and they're just steadfast with some of these concessions that they have now made, which does include the deal that they have on the table for Sony with 10 years of Call of Duty. We can see this posted up by VGC. This was in response, as they are going back and forth with the CMA, where they say Microsoft considers that a period of 10 years is sufficient for Sony as a leading publisher and console platform to develop alternatives to COD or Call of Duty. And I guess Sony is just trying through the CMA to get longer. Like, do they want a 15 or a 20-year deal? Microsoft has already given out 10-year deals to Nvidia, to Nintendo, and a few other streaming platforms, right? So then for them to have to go, okay, and now we're going to do 20 years for Sony, doesn't look great, right? With some of the partners you've already made deals with, but also for Microsoft, you gotta cut it off somewhere. Like, there's got to be a line at some point where you're like, okay, 10 years is enough for you guys to go out there and create your version of Call of Duty. They say an alternative. Maybe they don't necessarily want to say a competitor Call of Duty. They're trying to word it a bit differently, because Sony has been very clear they can't create a competitor for Call of Duty. It's just too much time, too much resources, too much money. It just would not be feasible for them to do it. But in this case, Microsoft says, you guys have 10 years. Start planning right now after you sign that deal. And maybe in 7 or 8 years, you'll have a really good platform set up for SOCOM or a new intellectual property. Killzone comes back, Resistance, Warhawk, get creative. But so that's kind of the direction I would like to see anyway from Sony. I would like them to be pressed for a new multiplayer game that could compete with Call of Duty, because if we get to a world where Call of Duty is like the be-all end-all after seeing Battlefield stumble so much, Halo stumble, it could be kind of boring over time. So yeah, I would like to see Sony, especially their first party, or even a a studio that they work alongside of to develop with them to come up with something interesting and unique to kind of put a spin on the classic military shooter. But so far, Sony doesn't even want to hear that. They want Call of Duty like just perpetually, or obviously just have this completely blocked. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Crash Team Rumble. This, of course, was revealed last year, and it's like this 4v4 arena Crash Bash kind of game. I don't know. It's interesting looking, I guess, for Crash fans, but there's still some questions around how it's going to hold up exactly. But we did get a release date for it, a closed beta period, as well as pre-orders going live. And we can see the trailer they released here. And they say this is from Toys for Bob, that developed Spyro's Reignited Trilogy and Skylanders. Get ready to collect and drop off Wumpa Fruit before the competing team across a variety of maps, along with the heroes and villains of the Crash universe. They all do have unique abilities and powers, I guess similar to like a hero shooter kind of game, but this obviously isn't like a shooter. So the closed beta period begins April 20th and will run 4 days to the 24th, and the game is scheduled to launch June 20th, 2023, currently up for pre-order on the Xbox and the PlayStation. Now, during that closed beta, there will be 5 different characters you can play as, including characters like Crash, Coco, Neo Cortex. There will be 3 different maps that I guess they'll be rotating through, and they have different layouts, challenges, relic stations that unlock even more powers, and it, again, sounds like their spin on a hero shooter, hero brawler, I guess, and to have one of these online multiplayer games from in the Crash universe at least sounds unique enough, but it is obviously in a sea of live service games that have a similar idea to them. So I do see this really appealing more so to Crash fans, obviously, and maybe I'll check it out for a bit, but these kind of games, unless they really grab my interest, I tend to move on from pretty quickly. But we'll at least find out more during that closed beta period next month, and after that, we can look towards the launch later on in June. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're gonna take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, how powerful are you expecting Nintendo's next system to be? 43% say PS4 level, 34% say a little stronger than the Switch, 18% say Xbox Series S level, and then 5% say PS5, Xbox Series X level. Well, hey, shoot for the sky on that one, right? But I think I'm falling somewhere in line with PS4 level, but as I mentioned, they'll have some other things attached to it like DLSS for upscaling, so I'm thinking even if it's a little more powerful than the PS4 base, like just raw teraflop number, I think it'll still be able to turn in similar performance or close to performance of what the Xbox Series S is doing right now, where you see it getting 1080p, 60 frames per second on several games. In some games, it actually will get 4K as it upscales there. Just the Switch, or the newer Switch, may not get all the bells and whistles for, I don't know, ray tracing at 60 or ray tracing at 30, even something like that. So still a lot of questions as to how far Nintendo will push this, but Nintendo likes to make money day one. I don't like to lose money on hardware, so that's kind of what trips me up most times, and assume that they'll disable parts of the chip, they'll customize it so that it's just right for them, and they come in at basically what's an acceptable power level. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Persona, saying, technically the Elden Ring deaths due to falling also includes a lot of dying by other players, since a lot of players left notes in game that jump off cliffs. Yeah, it happened to me at one point where it's like, oh, secret through here, and then the floor just caves in when you walk through it and you fall in spikes, or there's enemies down there and they kill you. So yeah, technically that is a player-made death at that point, right? It's indirect PvP, right? Indirect player death. So I would have loved to have heard how many people fell for those signs. I'm sure there are plenty. I don't really know how you would have tracked that though, because you could just walk past it without reading the sign. But yeah, I have a feeling you're right when it comes to a lot of the falls. It was probably a player somewhere that got away with it without being named. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Well, there's the new information around Nintendo's next generation platform with a 5nm fabrication from Samsung. What are your realistic expectations though for the power from this newer device? And then also, what about Spider-Man 2 just randomly having its release month kind of announced online as September? Sounds like a pretty big month though, right, with Starfield and Spider-Man 2. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.